Hey everybody, it's your average jeweler again. And if I can get a show of hands, just kidding, I can't see your hands, but if I can get you to ask yourself if you've ever taken something in for repair at a jewelry store, or if you've ever thought about taking something in for repair into a jewelry store, you may have had a lot of different thoughts go through your mind. For those that have done it many times, a lot of their questions are answered, and or they have a jeweler that they already trust that they know they can just ask all the questions to, and it's not a problem. But for the majority of people out there, I imagine you have some questions and you're a little bit anxious about taking something into a jeweler for repair. So in this video, I want to give you just some insight, some questions to maybe ask, and hopefully some good information so that when you do need to take something in for repair, you feel a little bit better and you know how to go about it. So let's talk about that today. All right, so you have a piece of jewelry and you need to take it in to have some work done. For the sake of just an example, I'm going to use something simple like having a ring sized. Let's say you have an engagement ring and you need it to go up a half a size. It just feels too tight for one reason or another. Maybe you originally had it done in the winter and made it tight, and now the weather's warmed up and you're realizing you need to make that ring just slightly bigger. So where do you start? Well, hopefully you either start with the jeweler you already know and trust, or you start doing some research about what jewelers are in your area that do repair. How long have they been doing repair? Do you know anyone else that might have used their services in the past? How long has that jeweler themselves been around? Those are all things that you would want to research beforehand. Again, if you already have a jeweler in mind that you feel comfortable with, then that piece is somewhat decided. But maybe at this point you do a little bit of research just to confirm what they do. A lot of jewelers can't do generalized pricing online because there's just too many variables, and people make a lot of assumptions once something is posted online and feel like that should be their situation. So you're not going to find a lot of pricing online, but you may find at least some background in what any given jeweler specializes in, or if they say they do general repair. Maybe they specifically say they do ring sizing. So do a little bit of research like that, and that's going to be your first piece before you even start just taking it in somewhere. Try and do a little bit of research. You can ask questions once you get there. Maybe you don't feel like you have the resources to just find the information that you're looking for, but do at least a little bit of basic legwork so that you don't just walk into the jewelry store completely blind. It's not the worst thing in the world. It's better to go in and get it fixed than not at all. But if you can be prepared, be prepared. The second area outside of research that I want you to be prepared for is know that when you walk in, you probably are going to have to leave your jewelry there. So understand that before you walk in and maybe assume that you're just going to wait there while they fix your ring. Even something as simple as sizing a ring, there's a process that goes into it, and not only does that take some time to do if they're dedicated to sizing that ring, but chances are they already have work going on, or they already have something that they're doing at that time, and they're not going to just drop everything to size your ring on the spot. You may have some jewelers in your area that do this, but know that I personally would rather a jeweler take his time and not feel rushed and not feel like someone is just breathing over his shoulder than just to have it done right there and then. I would rather wait and have it done the right way myself. But you may have the option based on the type of jeweler, the type of city you live in, the type of staff. They may be able to do some type of walk-in work, but be prepared that you're likely going to have to leave your jewelry there. Now, how long you leave your jewelry there for can depend on a lot of different things. It could depend on if that jeweler is working by themselves and they don't have anyone else helping them and they're the only people that do it. And that could be contingent on where you live. Maybe you're in a more rural area where there are not hundreds of jewelers that are available to just drop what they're doing and take on work. You may have the reality that they have to order some components. Depending on the type of work you're having done, they might actually have to get parts. And you have to be prepared to at least be asking or find out how long that's going to be. And if you really feel like it's beyond what you want to leave your jewelry for, certainly you have the prerogative to, again, do some more research, do some more legwork to find if there's a jeweler or an option that fits your needs a little bit better. But these are, again, things to be prepared for and things to expect, because many jewelers will ask you to leave it for a time period, and typically they'll give you that time period up front, but don't be surprised that they need time to get it done. Not because it's going to take them weeks to repair your jewelry, but there are other factors that you have to consider. Another thing that you can do to prepare is, if you're a little bit uneasy, take pictures of your jewelry, what it looked like when you dropped it off, and you can have that as a record. I think the danger on the other side of that is that you immediately put a lot of accusatory pressure on the jeweler when you take it in, and that brings me to my next point, which is, feel free to ask a lot of questions. Just make sure to keep those questions relevant. It's very easy when you're feeling anxious to start making more accusations than actually asking questions to try and be informed. The reality is, if you're going to be leaving that jewelry there, regardless of whether you offend that jeweler or not, you're still going to need to leave that jewelry there. So just be very deliberate when you're asking questions to a jeweler. If you are concerned about certain aspects of how they do things, ask them how they do things. But I wouldn't go out of my way to imply that they are somehow going to swap out your diamond or your stone, which seems to be a common concern, when they've been around for 20-something odd years, and it's very unlikely that they would stay in business if they made a practice of that. Of course, people, when they don't fully know or understand what they're doing or what they're looking for, they have a tendency to convey those concerns in a very accusatory way. I would just caution you on that, because again, you're trying to establish a relationship with this jeweler. It's maybe not the best approach to start off accusing things when he hasn't even had a chance to do anything yet. Some of the questions that I would encourage you to ask, they're probably going to give you some type of an estimate of cost. So you want to make sure you try and get an idea of what the cost is going to be, what that range of cost might be, and then what some outside variables might be. For instance, if the jeweler mentions that this is kind of a precarious repair where sometimes stones can be damaged, you might ask, how much does that cost me if a stone gets damaged? Or am I liable if one of these stones get damaged? Questions like that. If the jeweler is not giving you any of that information to imply that there's going to be additional cost, usually there's not. Typically they're going to call you if something comes up. They're not just going to do work and then charge you for something that wasn't discussed. But ask the question of expectation on cost and find out if there is a possibility that there might be additional cost within that initial estimate. I also don't want you to assume that all work is done right on site. A lot of jewelers do their own work and they do it on site, but depending on what they do, where they're at, and maybe even how specialized the work is, it's very possible they may need to send some things out to have the work done. Make sure to ask those questions. Don't assume. Don't ask it in a negative or derogatory way, but it is possible that work could be done off-site. Most jewelers are going to say that if that's the case, but if you're asking questions and you're trying to gather information, that's a good place to start as well. A lot of jewelers are going to be way ahead of some of these questions if you just give them a chance to explain their process. But you may want to ask how and when they're going to be communicating things. If there's a timeline in place, it's very likely that you're not going to have a communication until everything is done, unless they need to confirm something. If you are curious or wanting more communication than that, you're going to have to ask, or at least make sure that that's clear and that you don't just assume that. I find many times a repair might be estimated for 2 to 3 weeks, and somebody calls a week in concerned why they haven't heard anything. Well, if there was no reason to call you, they're probably not going to call you. And if you're expecting communication, you should probably make sure that's understood up front rather than just assuming. So talk to them about how and when communication is going to be made, whether they're going to call, if they have your email, and just get the clarity on that. Another point I'd like to bring up is some people view repair similarly to how they might view sales. First of all, not all jewelry stores haggle and move their prices around, but even more to the point, usually even jewelry stores that are willing to negotiate on price for sales are not able to do the same for repairs. Repairs inherently have their own set types of costs and time involved, and usually jewelers are not going to be negotiating on a lot of repair costs because they typically have thought out what they need and what both their time and risk and their expertise is worth. And so you could ask that question. I'm telling you up front, usually service is not an area where you would haggle. But if you're given an answer, I would not continue pushing on that. On the other side of things, why would you want the person you're dealing with to be kind of wishy-washy and all it takes is someone to kind of question them on their methods and they just change their mind all of a sudden? So you can ask if you feel like it's really high in comparison to maybe another quote you had, or possibly you could inquire if there are any other methods that could be done that maybe could save you some cost. But don't expect the repair side of things to be negotiable for most jewelers. Usually the cost of a repair is the cost of a repair. I think that gives pretty good insight into most of what you would expect when you walk into a jewelry store to have something repaired. A lot of it boils down to just ask questions if you have them. If you are concerned about any particular area or you want to know what their method is for doing something, if you're concerned if something's being shipped, how it's being shipped, you can ask all those questions. Don't make too many assumptions and don't start accusing when nothing has been done wrong. But please, if you have a question, ask your jeweler. Generally, they're happy to explain anything and they're happy to try and give you some insight into the process. At the end of the day, they want you to come back. So they want your experience to be good. They want you to come back as a customer, not just for repairs, but to come buy their jewelry. They want to build a relationship. They want to see you again. And I hope you reciprocate with that, because it's much easier when you do have repairs down the road, even if you're someone who doesn't buy a lot of jewelry. If you buy a piece of jewelry you care about, eventually you're going to need some type of work done, and it's better to have already established a relationship. I would also say it's okay to start small. If you have something big in mind as far as a repair, or you have a nice expensive engagement ring that you're a little hesitant to get fixed, maybe you have something that would be a smaller repair that you could take in first and find out what their process is, what they do. Just talk to them a little bit and see how comfortable you are with them, see how they do on that repair, and then as everything goes well, you can come back. That's a very viable method as opposed to coming in without any trust and again going straight to accusations, because the handful of jewelers that do in fact have negative and bad methods and are the ones on the news are again only a small portion of all the jewelers out there that are trying to do honest work and just like doing jewelry and want to establish a relationship. So try and give them the benefit of the doubt if at all possible, and I hope that through the experience you end up learning something. Just like our conversations here, I hope are helpful. I hope you'll just talk to them and you'll be surprised how much they might know. Thanks for being here again. I hope you come back so we can keep learning together.